Thank you to everyone for joining us for our Intro to Python technical workshop. My name is Diana. I'll be presenting our introduction slides. Before we begin, as I said before, please be sure to sign in with the QR code on the screen or in the chat. If you haven't yet, please visit repl.it to create a free account so that you can follow along with this workshop. You can preview the workshop slides to follow along with this link here. It should also be in the chat. And this workshop will be recorded, so if you are uncomfortable with being recorded, please be sure to have your camera off and your mic muted for the duration of this workshop. Anyways, we will get straight into the workshop. So our agenda today is we are going to hear from our collaborators. Today we have ACM Hack, AIChE Projects, as well as Quality of Life Plus. Then we will be going into an introduction to Python, our actual workshop, and learn the basics of Python from Maggie. After that, we will have a Python mini challenge where you'll be able to put your new skills to the test. And last but not least, find some opportunities to stay connected with our three organizations. So first and foremost, I will pass it off to Maggie.
Hello, my name is Maggie. I am a former officer of ACM Hack. So ACM Hack is a technical organization, and we learn about software engineering and exploring what's possible through code. And we have a lot of workshops and projects. The experiences from our workshops vary from very intro workshops like this one, or to like very complex and maybe niche topics. And we have Python workshops, we have mobile development series, and we have web development series, and we even have like workshops for interviews and standalone workshops on like TypeScript or JavaScript, things like that. We also have our own project program. They provide hands-on experiences. No previous experience is required, and you receive mentorship for each team, and it gives you hands-on experience in an industry-like environment. And we'll have a project showcase every quarter. So it is a very exciting thing to get involved in. So if you would like to stay connected, we do have a website at the end. So yeah.
Alrighty, thank you, Maggie. Next up, I will be sharing about AIChE Projects. I know this is a lot of words on the slide. Feel free to take a read as I present what our program is. But essentially, AIChE Projects is a program full of 6 different student-led project teams that are working to find engineered solutions to environmental issues in the local area. We have projects that range from wastewater treatment to the storage of energy, and we're really just looking for hands-on experience to put curriculum to the test and essentially make a change within our communities. If you have any questions, once again, our website will be at the end, and I will be open to any DMs in the chat as well. Alrighty, up next we have Alicia.
Hello everyone, my name is Alicia, and I'll be presenting QL Plus. So QL Plus is a project-based service organization that is partnered with the National Quality of Life organization. So we design custom assistive devices to help injured or disabled members of a community to overcome obstacles that they find in their life or in pursuit of hobbies. So the organization members will have the opportunity to work together and find solutions to address an issue or like any issue that comes from any individuals that they may have, and the members also get experience in areas such as assistive technology and medical devices. So these are some of the projects that we've been working on. The first one is the sensor project and the kayak project and the laparoscopic project. And we do have one more upcoming project. So yeah, feel free to ask me any questions if you have in the chat, and we do have the link at the end of this workshop. Thank you.
And right now, we can just jump right into our Intro to Python workshop. And I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay. All right. So this is going to be our Introduction to Python workshop. Welcome everyone to here. And if you haven't yet, please do register from an account on repl.it. And the slides will be available on bit.ly/intro to Python winter 22. It should be in the chat if you want to access the slides so you can follow along. So before we start talking about the technical details, first I want to introduce what Python is and what is it used for. So Python is a high-level programming language So it is close to human language rather than being close to machine language like C or C++ or ARM assembly. And Python has a lot of uses in the software engineering or machine learning world. So it's used in machine learning, software development, especially on the backend development, Flask and Flask. And there's data science, game development, web development, robotics, and much more beyond that. And over the years, we have the developers have made numerous extensive libraries. So it makes it a lot easier for developers to code it and do many powerful things. And it also has a lot of flexibility. So we don't have to worry a lot about low-level details like pointers or interfaces. So if you have ever coded in Java and C++ and you feel like it's giving you a headache, please do give Python a shot. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first Python program. And in repo.lit, I am going to be doing the exact thing. So just printing hello world. And so the way that you code in repo.lit, you literally just type it. And then on top, you will see the run button. So you click it to run your code. And as you can see, it prints out the sentence hello world, which makes perfect sense, right? And so next up, we would like to try something a little bit different. So instead of just doing print hello world, I'm going to do greeting equals to hello world, then print out greeting. So let's see what it does. Okay. It prints out the same thing, hello world. So what is happening over here? What we just saw is an example of variables. So variables are a very common thing across all programming languages. They are essentially locations in memory where we use to store our data. So for example, if we do full name equals to John Doe, it assigns the value John Doe into a variable called full name. So if you ever try to access full name, it will give you the value John Doe. So John Doe is a word or sentence, right? But variables can also store different stuff like numbers. So if you do age equals to 23, and if we try to access age by, for example, printing it, then it will print the value that age holds, which is 23 in this case. And as we saw on the previous slides, we have words or sentences, and we have numbers that can be stored in variables. These different types of data are called data types. So there are essentially 4 core data types that we can use in Python. There are more data types, but for today, we're going to be just focusing on these 4. So the first one is an integer. So just like the age one, age is 23, so it's an integer. It's an integer value was in the range negative 2 to the 31st to 2 to the 31st minus 1. So it can be positive or negative as long as an integer, okay? So examples include 0, which is an integer, -1, which is a negative integer, which also falls in the integer category. And you can do big numbers, as big as you want, as long as it's in the range. And floating numbers, floats are floating point values, which are just glorified decimal values within the same range as integers. So examples of floating point values include 0.5, -3.0. So keep note over here is even though -3.0 is technically an integer, the decimal point still makes it different from an int because it has that 0.0 over here. And you can do as many decimal places as you want as well. So next up is string. So if you remember from the previous slide, we had John Doe and hello world. These are all examples of strings. A string is essentially a sequence of characters that can represent any text. And we can use either single or double quotes to identify a string. So examples of a string include hello world, which we just did, 1, 2, 3. As you can see, it's used in double quotes, but also even though 1, 2, 3 can be a number, the fact that it's being enclosed in double quotes indicates that it's a string instead of like int. Also, what's up, which is a string in double quotes. And lastly, the one that we haven't seen before is called Boolean, which is a binary value that can be true or false, basically. It's a true statement. Next up, we have operators. So we have all these kind of data types, right? And we can do some interesting stuff with them. So first up, we have our equals or plus equals or minus equals. They are called assignment operators. So equals will assign the values to variables. So it will assign the value on the right to the variable on the left. Or plus equals will increment the variable, and minus equals will decrement the variable. So for example, age plus equals to 1 is basically incrementing the variable, taking the value of the variable age and incrementing its value by 1, then putting it back into the variable age. So if before this line of code we had age equals to 2, then age plus equals to 1 will take 2 plus 1 to it, then assign it back to age, which makes age change from 2 to 3. Next up, we'll have our comparison operators, which checks if two values are equal, not equal, greater, smaller, greater or equal to, smaller or equal to, and it will return a Boolean value indicating whether the statement is true. And just one thing to note over here, if you want to check if two values are equal to each other, you use the double equal sign just to avoid confusion with the assignment operator. So some examples over here will be 9 is equal to 10, which will return false. 6 is smaller than 21, which will return true. And 3 is bigger than or equal to 3, which will return true. And next up, we will have our arithmetic operators, which is basically math, but funky, because usually we will use these operators on integers or floats because they are numbers. But exception over here is that the add operators can be used on strings to concatenate the second string to the first string. So for example, 3 plus 3 is obviously 6. And if we use a plus on two strings, so February plus 17 will return to you the value February 17, which is the day of today, if you're wondering. And 5 divided by 3, you will get 1.67. Well, our last one that we're going to introduce today is logical operators. So they are used on Boolean values, and they will also in turn return a Boolean value. So the AND operator will return true if both values are true, and return false otherwise. So in order for the AND to return true, you will have to have both Boolean values on both sides of it to be true, otherwise it will return false. The OR operator will return true if one of those are true, or else it will return false. So note over here, if both the values are true on the sides of OR, the result will be true. The only case for the OR operator to return false is when both the argument on both sides are returning false. So the NOT operator will return the opposite of its original value. Some examples over here. So if we have here 9 is equal to 10 and 6 is smaller than 21. So we start trying to solve this by trying to see what values on each side of the AND operator is. So 9 is equal to 10 is false, and 6 is smaller than 21 is true. So because we have an AND operator over here, and they are not both true, it will return false. On the other hand, however, if we use the OR operator, so one of these is true, right? 6 smaller than 21 is true, which means that using the OR operator, we'll be getting true. And not false will return true because we are returning the opposite of false. So here's a pop quiz over here. So right now we will have 3 different examples, and I will give you 2 minutes to try to solve what each of the statements will be printing out. And feel free to put the answer in the chat, please. In the meantime, I'll be playing some Jeopardy music. Oh no, not YouTube ads, not YouTube ads. Feel free to refer to previous slides if you're having trouble remembering what the operators mean. Yes, also feel free to open up the code editor so that you can see the result output for your own eyes. Again, if you have the answer, please feel free to put it in the chat. I will give 30 more seconds. We have great answers in the chat. Keep going. Good job so far. Okay, the chat's on fire today because you both got the correct answers. So I can walk through all these examples. So in the first example, right? So x equals to 3, which means we will be assigning the value of 3 into the variable x. And then in the next line, we'll be taking 3, then decrement it by 2, which is 3 minus 2 equals to 1, which we'll be printing out, which returns 1. And in the next case, we have y equals to 9.0, and we divide that value by 2. So basically on the second line, we're doing y equals to 9.0 divided by 2 and printing out the value, which will return the final value of y, which means 4.5. The next one is a little bit funky. So in order for us to solve this one, we'll be trying to work out the value was in the parentheses first. So 3 is smaller than 2 is false. So basically, we're trying to do not false and true. False and true basically means false, right? But so the value of z is essentially not false, which is true. Good job, everyone in the chat. You all got it correct. So let's move on to the next part of our workshop, which is experimenting with more different types. So now that we have experimented doing like additions, multiplications, and string concatenations, right? So what if we try to operate between two different types? How will things work? So right now we have a sentence over here and we have a price. So we want to print out how much a medium boba attack has cost, right? So let's see if it works out in our code editor. So what I'm gonna do right here is literally copy and paste this into our code editor and pray that it works. Sometimes the editor can be a little bit funky because if you copy and paste from the slides, double quotes is gonna be a little bit weird. So all you have to do is to just like erase the double quotes and then re-enter them again. So if we run this, and it's not letting us. What is happening? So if you see the error message, you can see the error message, a type error, and it's saying that you can only concatenate a string and not a float to a string. What does that mean in the word? So in order to solve this problem, we'll be talking about operating with different types. So as we have already introduced in the previous slides, we have strings and integers, right? So if we do x is equal to string 11 within the quotes, we can see that x is a string. And if we do y equals to 11, then y is an integer. So if we try to print x plus string 1, it will work because by string concatenation, we'll just be concatenating the 1 at the end of 11, which will print out 111. And if we want to print out y plus number 1, it will also successfully print, but it's using like basic addition. So it adds 1 to 11, which prints out 12. However, if you try to print x plus 1, which is a string plus a number, it will throw out an error because of type mismatch. So the solution to this is that, well, we really don't want things like errors like this to be happening, right? Because sometimes we do really want a number to be added to a string, like the example that we showed before. And what we do is called typecasting. So basically typecasting is you take a value of a data, take something's value and cast it into a different type. So there are 4 basic method, the int method will return an integer value based on its argument if it's possible. So for example, if you do int of string 1, it will return the number 1 because it processes a string. If we do int of 2.3, then it will return true, which means it's basically rounding the float down to the most closest integer. And if we do int with an argument of false, then it will return 0 because false is 0 as an integer. So float is very similar to integer, except that it will return a float value based on its argument. And string will always return a string value based on its argument, and Boolean will always return a value based on its argument. And so now that we know that we can have typecasting to cast things into different types, all that we have to do in order to solve this problem is we can cast price into a string. Oh, my keyboard's acting funky today. I apologize for this. So right now, by doing the string method, we'll parse the 4.95 number into a string. So essentially what's gonna do over here is it's concatenating the string presented in sentence and with another string that's representing the number 4.95. So if we run this right now, it will print out everything successfully. Do we have any questions up to this point in the chat? If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them because it helps us learn, right? So we have already tried printing things, right? As we already did in the beginning of the workshop, and we just did just now. So we already know how to output things. So print is a method with a required argument. So it will print out whatever we passed in as an argument, and it can print out a literal value, or it can print out a value that's being stored in a variable. So it can print any data type. It can print strings, integers, booleans, etc. Just make sure the types are consistent if you're doing additions or stuff like that. Another thing is, if we want to read from the user, we can use the input method, but this time its argument is optional. So if you do define an argument, then it will print that argument first, then ask for your input. And if you don't define an argument, then it will just ask for your input. Usually the use case of this is you assign the output of this method into a variable. So it stores whatever you input as a result of this prompt, and you can use it later. So yeah, we can have an example over here. So, well, we can just try to copy and paste it into the editor again, shall we? So by the way, also, if you're wondering what this means, so the hashtag is how you comment in Python. So comments are part of the code that's not meant for the machine, but it's meant for the users. So if you have a long code that you are working with other people and you kind of want to explain what the code is going to be doing, this will be really useful. So if we copy and paste this into the code editor, so as you can see, it prints out, "Hi, what's your name?" And I will be entering Maggie, and pressing enter kind of just signifies the end of the input. And it prints out, "Maggie, do you like to code?" Another alternative way for me to do this is to get out and delete this argument, but also do this. So print, "Hi, what's your name?" It essentially does the same thing, Maggie, and it still does the same thing, "Maggie, do you like to code?" And another thing is that we just demoed. We can print the statement first, then ask for input and store it into a variable. And we can do things based on what value is being stored in that variables later. So okay, we already talked about typecasting. So typecasting is an example of built-in functions in Python. So, well, we can cast data types, which we already talked about, and we can even use them to do like cool math stuff. We have like absolute values, sum, div mod, max, round. We can have Boolean logics. So any returns true if any of these are true, any of the arguments are true. All will return true if all the arguments are true. And you can even have like a lot of built-in functions for you to be able to utilize your code and make it powerful, really powerful, do a lot of different stuff. So if you want to see the complete list of functions, you can visit the official Python documentation. So if you do want to open and check it out, I will just show it on screen right now. And as you can see, we have absolute values, enumerate, we have list method, we have main, we have type, vars, zip, set, range, a lot of different methods that you can use. And if you click on any argument, any like function, it will tell you the detailed usage of it. It's really powerful, to be honest. Well, Python does have a lot of built-in functions, but as we mentioned in the beginning of the workshop, there are many developers who made functions that are called library functions. So Python has libraries of pre-implemented functions for us to use, and we can use our functions to sort the list or even get a random number, which we'll be using in our exercise later. And the set of functions that we can use is called the Python standard library, which I will also show on screen. And as you can see, there are many different things that we can use. And as we saw earlier, we can also see the detailed usage of every function. But what's different is that if we want to use library code, we need to import it from the libraries that we be using. So what do we do with this is that we do so by putting the import statement at the beginning of the program. So if we want to import the library called random, well, then we just do import random. And what if we want to use a library function, right? So the template of using a library function is by calling the library name, then putting a dot with the function name, and within parentheses, put its parameters. So I will show you a usage of one function. This function is called random. Okay, so randint is within the random library, and then randint, right? So as you can see, random.randint will have two arguments. So we'll return a integer n such that a is smaller or equal to n, is smaller than or equal to b. So basically, it's inclusive on both sides. And so if we want to do this in our code, then we will import the random library because it's an outside library code that's not built in for Python itself. Then we can do x equals to random, which is the library name, .randint, which is the function name. And then let's just do arguments with 0 and 5. And if we run it, oh, typo. Typos happen a lot when you're coding, by the way. So if your code is not working, then just the first thing you should check is probably some typos. So if we print the value of x, then this first time we'll print out 5. So it's really just a random number between 0 and 5 that you can print out. So it's pretty cool in some scenarios, including in the next project that we're going to be trying out together. So yeah, speaking of our challenge, let's try to code something. So on this slide, we do have a link called bit.ly/Python number generator. So if you open this link, right, you should see a fork button that allows you to fork it into your own code that you can edit it. So you will do the part, you will be able to do the parts before, while, false. So do this portion below before line 30. That's the parts that we have covered in the workshop so far. And we can see you in the, we'll start by going into breakout rooms. So you'll be working in teams of like maybe 5 or 6 people. And I will be jumping around. And after 10 or 15 minutes, I will be just going over the solution with everyone. So yeah, good luck with your coding sessions. And I will see you in the breakout rooms. Okay. So right now we have our starter code, and you all seem to be doing a really good job in breakout rooms. So congratulations. But for those who are unable to code running yet, I will be kind of walking everyone over the logic. So the first step that we're going to do over here is to import the random library, right? So as we mentioned on the slides, by importing a library. We just put the import keyword and by putting the library name after this. And so what this code is doing is we are assigning the value 8 into chances, assigning the value 100 to upper bound, which, to be honest, you can just change to whatever you want. But for right now, we're just gonna be assigning them random values. So in order for us to get the value into an answer from the user's input, remember, in order to get the user's input, a random number, right? So if we want to get a random number, we want to call the randRange function. Or we can just call the randInt function as well. So from 0 to upper bound. So random is the library name, randInt is the function name, and 0 in the upper bound is the arguments that we're gonna be passing in. So for printing something, it's very simple. We just copy and paste this. Let's copy this and paste it into here. It'll print out, make a guess about the number. And also, the next thing that we're going to be printing out is the number is an integer between 0 and, but do remember that upper bound is holding an integer right now. And in order for us to be able to print it out, concatenate to a string, we'll need to cast it into a string first. Otherwise, it will give us an error. String upper bound. So it will take the value of upper bound and change it into a string and then concatenate it to the previous string that we'll be doing. And so right now we'll be initializing the response with the user's input, right? So in order for us to do this, we'll be calling the input method. So what we want to prompt the users with is already printed out before. So we don't really have to pass an argument into input, but after this, I can show you guys a different way of doing this. Integer value of response. And just for convenience sake, we'll be casting it to integer because we want to use it as a number. So in order for us to kind of just see what values we have so far, we will be printing out the value of answer, and we can also print out the value of response. So if we run this, and right now we don't know what the answer is so far, so we'll be just trying to make a guess, which I'll guess 97. So as you can see, we're printing out the answer correctly, which is 24, and our response, which is 97. As I already promised you guys, I will be showing a different way of asking for the user's input. So what we do is we completely throw away the print statement, and we just put whatever we want to output in the as an argument of the input method. So as we run the code, which hopefully it works, yes. So I'll be guessing 97 again. And as we can see, it prints out 97 as our guess. And the answer is 7, which is different from last time because it's completely random. So congratulations for solving the first part of this challenge. And next up, we'll be talking about more Python. Well, hopefully that's not a surprise by now. So congratulations again on finishing the first part. So right now we'll be jumping into something even more interesting and intricate, which is called conditional commands. So we have a lot of statements for us to check if some statements are true and then do some actions according to this. So we have 3 commands. The first one is the if statements. So it will do something, execute some action, depending on whether the statement is true, right? So if x is bigger than 10 in this case, then we'll be printing out x is greater than 10. If it's not, then we don't do it. So next up, we have else if statement, else, which is short for else if. Well, it will only execute if the previous if or else if statement is not true, but the current one is satisfied. So for example, if we have x equals to 9 over here, it's not bigger than 10, right? But it's bigger than 8, so we will be entering the body of this else if statement, and we'll be printing x is bigger between 8 and 10. And in the other scenario, if we have x is equal to 7, then we will not satisfy this. We will also not satisfy this, but we will satisfy this condition, which means that we will print out x is between 6 and 8. And finally, we'll have a statement called the else statement, which will execute if all the previous if/else if statements are not satisfied. So let's say if we have x is equal to like 5, or x is like a negative number or of any sort, then we'll be printing out x no greater than 6 because it's not satisfying any of these conditions. And one thing to note is that if you want to identify the body of a if statement, then you need to indent it. By indentation, we mean just like pressing tab after you change to a new line. Most editors will do it automatically, but it's very important because you don't want to confuse the code to like what is actually in the body of your if statement and what is in your other code sample. So yeah, just to show you like why indentation is important. Oh, why is it not letting me exit? Okay, there we go. So if we want to, sorry, technical difficulty, repo.it. So just to demonstrate why indentation is important, right? So indentation will allow Python to know what is in the body of your statements. So GGDG, okay. So let's say we have this thing called x equal to 5. And then if x is greater than 6, then we print out x is greater than 6. And we have this line, which is not indented, which means that it's not within the body of this if logic. It will print no matter what. Python is awesome. So if we run this statement, we'll only see Python is awesome. However, if we also indent this line, it will also make Python is awesome as a body of this if statement. So this line will also only print if x greater than 6. So if we run this, nothing will print out. So indentation is very important for you to identify what is a conditional action that you want to execute depending on the truth of this statement. So now that we have our if and else statements, we will have our loops. So the first loop that we're going to be introducing is called the for loop. So basically, it will iterate over the items of any sequence, like a list or a string. And usually, the for loop is appearing in conjunction with a range argument, which has a start at the end, and a step. The step argument is optional and would default to 1 if you don't define it. So also note that if you have the end argument, it's exclusive. So when the value reaches 10, it will no longer execute it. So it will stop before it reaches 10. So if you have this argument called this line called for index in range with arguments 1, 10, then it will initialize index to 1, then increase it by 1 each time because step defaults to 1 until index is equal to 9. So on the next iteration, when index is equal to 10, it will not do anything anymore. Another thing is called a while loop. So for loop will execute a defined number of times. Basically, the while loop can execute like 0 times or infinite number of times, depending on whether the statement is true. So it will execute as long as the argument behind it is true. So if we have this statement called while 9 plus 10 is equal to 21, the loop will never execute because 9 plus 10 is equal to 21 is never true. So we also have loop conditioning keywords, which are break and continue. So if you ever put break in the body of your loop, it will stop the execution of the current iteration and skip all the remaining iterations. So if you have like 8 iterations in total and you go on break for the second one, then it will just end the loop as a whole. And if you do continue, on the other hand, it will still skip the current iteration, but it will move on to the next iteration. So if you do continue on the second iteration, it will move on to the third one. So another exercise time, I will be really quick this time for like 30 seconds. So what do you think this code is gonna output? 30 seconds, I think one iteration of the Jeopardy music. Good job, chat. You're on fire today because your answer is totally correct. So in order for us, the best way for us to see the output is to put it into a code editor, literally. So I'll be copying this and pasting them once again into our replit. So what's happening over here is that, so if you remember the introduction to the range function, right? So it will range over, so it will initialize x to 0, repeat until x is equal to 10, and increase x by 2 for each iteration. So when we enter the first, iteration, we'll have x equal to 0, which will print it out. And after that, we'll be incrementing x by 2, which prints 2 and 4 and 6 and 8, right? So after we print 8, we'll increment it once again by 2. So this time x's value will be equal to 10, but the loop will stop before x reaches 10. So we will be no longer printing out the value of 10. So our output should be 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. Like in this order, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. Let's see if it's correct. Yep, that is totally correct. So hopefully that gives you some demonstration about how loops work. And we have even more challenges. This one I will give you 1 minute to solve, and feel free once again to drop your answers in the chat, and good luck. I'll give 40 more seconds. The chat's on fire today. Wow. I am so happy right now because you're on fire today. Okay, we can go through the logic again. So once again, I'll be copying and pasting the code into our editors. Wrong tab. So what's happening right here is that we are initializing the value of y to be 10. And remember, the while loop will keep executing as long as the statement behind is true. So in this case, we'll be keep executing it as long as y is not 0, okay? So in our first iteration, we have y equals to 10, which satisfies this condition, and we'll be going into the loop body of this loop. So if y mod 2 is equal to 0, we'll be printing y, which in this case, yes, 10 mod 2 is equal to 0, which should print out 10. And y equals -1 will change y's value from 10 to 9. And still satisfies the while loop, but it no longer satisfies this. So we do not print 9. And we keep decrementing its value by 1, which will give us 8. Still satisfies this, no longer satisfies also satisfies the if statement, which will print out 8. So similarly, we'll be printing out not printing 7, but printing 6, not printing 5, but printing 4, not printing 3, but printing 2, and we'll be not printing 1, right? So after we skip this iteration, we skip this printing y, then we'll have y's value. We're gonna be decrementing it by, we'll be decrementing it by 1. So it changes to 0, and it will no longer satisfy this condition because y in this case is equal to 0. So it will stop the execution of the while loop entirely, which means our output should be 10, 8, 6, 4, 2. And we shall see if it's correct. It is correct. Congratulations, everyone who answered in the chat. I'm really happy. I'm actually really happy right now. So hopefully that gives you more information about the if conditions and for loops and while loops. So you guys should be ready to make into our second and final code challenge, which is finishing the rest of the random number guesser. So once again, we'll be breaking out into breakout rooms, and I will be giving until 6:20 for you to be working on this. And feel free once again to collaborate with one another, and I will be jumping around to help everyone. So yes, good luck, have fun, and I'll be seeing you all in the breakout rooms. So I'll be going over the solutions with everyone right here. And after this, we'll be going over some extra resources. So we'll be deleting the print values. Well, they don't really do anything to impact our code, but if we have some statements that are printing that we don't necessarily need, then we can just remove them. So what we're gonna do right here is we repeat until the guess is equal to the answer, right? So essentially what we do is that we repeat the loop as long as our guess is not equal to the answer. So we'll see our condition over here is that response is not equal to answer, right? So as long as response is not equal to answer, we will be repeating this loop. And as a result, every time we guess, right, we'll be decreasing the number of remaining guesses by 1. So let's see the number of chances that we have is stored within the variable called chances. So essentially what we can do is chances equals to chances minus 1. Or if you do not want to type chances again because you hate the word, you can just do chances minus equal to 1. So right here we have our first if statement. So if we do not have any guesses left, then we will tell the user that they are out of chances, which is kind of sad, but it will happen, right? So if our chances is running out, which is essentially comparing chances to 0, or if you want to do something just in case for some weird particular reason it goes below 0, you can also go chances smaller than equal to 0 because it's always supposed to be above 0 anyway. So if this happens, then we'll be printing out these 2 lines, and then we'll be printing out what the answer actually is. So now we have used all our chances, and we do not want the user to be guessing the answer once again. So what do we do, right? We have 2 keywords, remember? The first one's continue, which will move us on to the next iteration. And then we will have break, which will skip over all the remaining iterations. In this case, we'll be using break because we do not want to repeat the loop once again if we are just out of chances. So right here, if you forget the if condition statement, it's right here. So how you do if statement is use the if statement, if keyword, then you put a condition after this. So if the guess is smaller than the answer, right? Smaller than the answer, then our guess is stored as a response. So if response is smaller than answer, then we want to print out something, for example, right? So the answer is smaller, is bigger, then we can stringify our response. So print out, for example, if we have our response is like 50, but the answer is 60, it'll print out the answer is bigger than 50. So else if, right? Else if, so it will only execute if statement is not met. Else if response is bigger than or equal, bigger to the answer, then we will print out something very similar, but by replacing bigger than with smaller. I don't know why it is giving me a problem with this, but let me try to do this.
I think it's because you misspelled response.
Ah, thank you very much. You see, typos are pesky. Thank you, Diana. Response. There we go. Thank you. Then if our response is bigger than the answer, we'll be printing out the answer is bigger than string of response. Then because the answers are chances not depleted, we'll ask the user to enter a new guess. But there's something we're still missing, right? We haven't handled the condition where the user gets the correct number. So what we can do is literally do this. So else, actually, hold on. There's a way for us to do this better, but we can just show you how to do this first, then else. So else statement will execute if the if statement is not true and all the else if statements are not true. So for us to be reaching the else statement means that the answer is not, the response not smaller than the answer, and the response is not bigger than the answer. Then what could it mean, right? It means the response is equal to the answer. So print, yay, you guessed the correct answer. And we will also tell them like the answer is plus stringify. Remember, you need to concatenate a string to a string, not a number to a string. So answer. Okay, so we can keep going. We can run the code. 0 to 100, let's guess 50. The answer is bigger than 50. So let's guess 75. And there's something happening right here. If the response is smaller than the answer, which I know what the problem is because when we are reinitializing the response, we just got a raw input from our user, which will get us a string. So in order for us to be able to compare them like once again, we'll be casting the response into an integer so we can compare them again. Guess will equal to the doing response. We can run them again. So let's do 50. And the answer is still bigger than 50. And we shall do 75. And it's bigger than 75. Note that this time we have not run into any other problems. So let's just guess 87. Bigger than 87, wow, it's a big number. 95. It's still bigger than 95. 97. Bigger than 97, wow, 99. It's 100? Interesting, how is it bigger than 100? Oh, I am very sorry. I forgot to change the print statement. So let's try it again, okay? This is a hiccup on my end. Answer is bigger than 50, right? And let's do 75. It's bigger than 75. 90, smaller than 90. Okay, this time is actually performing as expected. And just again, plus string chances plus chances left. It's invalid literal for int with base 10. Or which is kind of, debugging is also a very important skill. So if you're like ever coding your stuff and you're into bugs like this, so the first thing you look for is that which part your code is erroring on. In this case is in this case it's line 62. So what I'm guessing is that let's put a break statement over here and see how it works. So if it's 50, and just bigger than 50, and 75, it's 475, let's do 63, 63, bigger than 63, let's do 68, 68, 65. And it's not doing anything here. I'm very sorry, guys. This has not happened when I'm trying to code it by myself, but we can try to figure out a problem together, okay? So in order for us to do this, let's try to cheat a little bit and print out the answer and see what happens when we guess the correct answer right away. Okay, so the answer is 56, right? So let's guess 56. And it's not printing out the statement. That is super weird because it should have entered this part. Is anyone else's code working on this part? Is anyone like else if response is equal to answer? Okay, let's try that. So we'll be cheating once again and see it's not working. Let's try to remove this to see if it happens. (22). It should be printing, which is super weird, and we don't know what's happening right here. Let's see on the chat. A final print statement was outside of the loop. Okay, let's try that. Yeah, because originally I did put it right here. I just wanted to like demonstrate what else can we do to skip over the extra response. So let's try this, okay? Print. You have guessed the correct answer. Print the answer plus a stringified version of answer. Let's cheat it once again, and it prints out everything, right? Okay, so I figured out what's happening right now because this loop only executes while the response is not equal to answer, right? So once we guess the correct thing, the response will be equal to answer, which causes everything to stop within this loop. So this loop is essentially already checking if we have not the correct answer. So if we want to handle the correct answer, we want to put it outside the loop. So which is why it wouldn't work inside. So thank you for whoever pointed this out. I really appreciate it, and apologies for the hiccup right here. So if we remove the answer right here, right? So remove the print statement of the answer, and we run it, and then now we can actually properly guess it. So let's do 75, bigger than 75, let's do 82. Bigger than 82, let's do 90. Smaller than 90, let's do 86. It's 84. So it has to be 83 in this case. Yep. So now our product works properly. So thank you all for sticking around. with us in this workshop. And lastly, I will be going over some extra resources that you can use to learn Python. So right now for today, our workshop content is basically the most basics of Python, some conditioning, some variables, and logic. So if you want more resources, we have learnpython.org, some dev hints, some Python documentation, and there are like a lot of great programming resources in Python that you can use to learn from. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming by. I really appreciate your time and I hope this workshop has been useful to you. And lastly, we'll be presenting how to stay connected with our organizations. Diana, if you want to share your screen, please go ahead.
Alrighty, thank you everyone for sticking with us. I thank you for your participation and sharing your evening with us. On the screen, we have some websites with our 3 different organizations if you'd like to stay connected. Some of us will be staying back just a couple of minutes if you have any questions regarding Python, any of our organizations, or just want to have a discussion. Other than that, that is all we have for you today, so you are free to go, and thank you for your time.